Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank Steve and the Rio Grande Guardian for arranging this presentation on preventing airborne pandemics. Like many of you, I have been following the COVID pandemic from the very beginning with utter disbelief and sadness. I was concerned from the very beginning that some important factors were overlooked. I believed then and I believe now that some lives and some infections could have been avoided. I was also frustrated that I could not get my ideas to the experts in time to be able to influence the pandemic management. And I am convinced today that if we are threatened with another pandemic, we should not make the same mistakes. I have been researching and trying to develop ways we can accomplish this. Over the last 4 years, starting from the very beginning of February of 2020, I've been writing letters to individuals, media, and on the internet. And I have also published a paper relating to the COVID management. Finally, I have also written a book about the COVID management, and it's titled Corona Be Not Proud. The title is styled uh, on the poem that was published in 16th century or something like that, and that title was Death Be Not Proud. So I hate Corona just as much as he hated death. So I want to go over some of the numbers that I collected from the Worldometer COVID statistics. Today, the world has about 8 billion people, and about point about 9% of the people got infected with COVID. 9%. And 1% of the infected people died, which makes about 0.09 percent of world population. Compared to the past pandemics, this is nothing in numbers, but in the amount of chaos that it produced is the same level because of multiple other reasons. I don't want to go into those details. For the US, the challenge and the problem was even worse. With 4.5% of world population, United States had about 16% of infections and about 17% of deaths. This is disproportionate. Also, United States had 1.35% of global deaths in the 1918 flu pandemic. And now for the COVID pandemic, it went up to 17%. Obviously, something has changed. COVID hit this country like a biological equivalent of a Pearl Harbor attack. And in the year 2020, we did not have the vaccines. the public health department was not prepared properly, and we had about 350,000 deaths in that year. The next year, we had the vaccines. The public health department was better prepared. With all that, the death rate did not go down. In fact, it went up to 415,000. So, all these prove that there is a factor that we have not really taken into consideration, and the virus was its own master, deciding where to go, who to infect, how many people kill, to be killed. Everything was determined by the virus itself. What we did and did not do did not make a lot of difference. In the last 1 month, there are about 3,620 deaths reported from COVID, of which 3,200 are from this country and 420 are from the rest of the world. A lot of it is due to problem in the reporting, but it just shows that we are not yet well prepared um, for another pandemic, and even the infection that we had. The government did appoint a commission to study the lessons from the COVID management. And in 2023 or somewhere in that time, it was called off. And the rumor is that they didn't have anything nice to report. That's why they did not report anything, and the commission was called off. But some private agencies did make some observations and make some conclusions. And uh, the independent task force, for example, they came out and said that after decades of warnings and years of international planning, the world and United States were unprepared for this pandemic. Another group who called themselves the COVID crisis group, they wrote a book on COVID management, and they called it Lessons from the COVID War. And in this book, they presented mostly negative ideas about the COVID management. And they mentioned that we were flying blind all through the pandemic. And they also said that we went into the 21st century pandemic management with healthcare designed for the 19th century. So we were only 200 years behind. So in their assessment, the UN General Assembly appointed a panel to study the COVID management. And in September 2023, they come out with this statement that if another pandemic happens, the world will again be unprepared. All these are very negative statements, and I have not seen anybody mentioning anything really nice about the way we manage the pandemic. And I somehow have to agree with them to some extent. But I go beyond that and say that there is something else that was overlooked. H.G. Wells stated that we have bought the right to live in this planet and coexist with all the living beings by sacrificing billions of people to earn this right, and that those people who died were not wasted. We accomplished something from that. After going through the negative statement from the COVID management lessons, we would think that this statement was wrong and that we really wasted about 7 million people and we did not learn anything from the COVID management. I absolutely disagree with that because we did learn something, and that's what I want to present it today. I have been following the COVID from very beginning in great detail. I have done some research and I have come up with some proposals which most probably can prevent next pandemic. I will go into the details as we go along. I also feel that this method that I am describing will also reduce seasonal flu. It will reduce hospital-acquired infections. It will reduce allergic disorders. And when you analyze what I have to tell you, you'll be wondering why we did not start doing this all these days. Why did not do it before? So that's what I am talking about today. It's about pandemic control in primarily or prevention of pandemics, and it's coming from Brownsville, so I have to put it like from Brownsville to the world. And that's my way of appreciating where I live now. Okay. After analyzing the life cycle of the pandemic, I have come up with 4 main reasons why this pandemic spread so fast and killed so many people. These are asymptomatic spread, air conditioners behaving as a vector similar to mosquitoes for malaria, airborne spread, and this sneaky hustler virus itself, which has so many new qualities that it made it very special to be able to spread fast and evade medicines and vaccines. Asymptomatic spread. This is probably one of the most important and most neglected single factor in the pandemic. About 50% of infections came from people who behaved normal. You could not tell them they were giving the infection to you. In the beginning of the 20th century, there was one lady, many people know her as Typhoid Mary. She was asymptomatically spreading typhoid and killed about 20 people. People got around to her and put her on confinement, solitary confinement for the last 20-25 years of her life. That is just one person. What I am saying is that during the COVID pandemic, we had millions of COVID Harrys and COVID Marys secretly spreading the infection, and this did not get enough attention. And WHO even downplayed this possibility. And I call it Pearl Harbor attack on steroids, because it's like the enemy left behind 1 million secret agents to infiltrate the American people at police force, every level of thing, and cause chaos. So, in other words, these 50% infection from asymptomatic spread was something that so important and did not get enough attention. Now, there are some experts saying that we could have identified them by doing more testing. I disagree, because if you have to find all the asymptomatic spreaders, you have to test 350 US citizens and all the other non-citizens living here once a week for the duration of the pandemic. That's not possible, So blaming not testing enough for the spread of the pandemic in my opinion, does not carry too much weight. Airborne spread. This is another thing that the WHO downplayed. Airborne spread was there from the very beginning, and WHO kept on saying there is no airborne spread. Their misinformation resulted in very precious resources being wasted on useless preventive measures and deviated from what is really important, which is managing the ventilation and maybe wearing the mask. That was not addressed, and WHO can take a lot of blame for that. I have also thought that there is a concept of virus smoke. I will explain that later. I came up with that word, virus smoke. And that and the fact that the virus smoke can spread through the air conditioner and infect the buildings, air conditioned facilities of all kinds, airplanes, cars, everything can be infected instead of just infecting the individuals. So if you have an infected building, you can walk into the building and you are at the mercy of the virus. And this is another thing that I believe did happen. Now, air conditioners acting as vectors. This is not even discussed at the higher levels, but what's happening is the air conditioned units, like whether it is a building or a car or a plane or anything, it's an air balloon separated from the outside air. And there is no cross ventilation in that. There is an air inlet and there is an air outlet. And inside this, the infected people and the asymptomatic carriers are releasing the viruses and incubating the people who are trapped in there. This is why a lot of infection came from people who traveled the airplanes or went to the churches or were during those days, because the air-conditioned units, like infected buildings, infected planes, acted as vectors. This is overlooked. There's another factor from the air conditioner that caused the problem, and that is the temperature gradient. So now air conditioners don't have a cross ventilation. That's one problem. Second problem is the temperature gradient. Especially in cold weather, the hot air is coming from the ceiling, and the principle of the hot air balloon is that hot air moves things up. Hot air goes up. So inside the room, in the winter months, when the hot air is coming from the top, it doesn't go down to the ground and bounce back and get out. It stays near the ceiling and crawls out. As you move away from the ceiling, the air speed gets slower and slower and cooler and cooler. And in the lowermost level, the air may not even get into the circulation. It may just go round and round at the ground level. And this is where the wheelchairs and patient beds are, and this is where the people are trapped. This shows the principle of the air being faster and warmer on the top and slower and cooler on the bottom. And the lowermost air is not even getting into the circulation. And the relative humidity of the air-conditioned units are lower than outside. And so in the lower part of the room, you have dry, cold, stagnant air. And that's the best condition for viruses to stay alive, to stay active. And especially when you turn the air conditioner fan on auto, there is a period during the during the 24-hour period where the fan is not turning at all, and so the room air is completely static, and that is incubation of the virus with the trapped people. So these two aspects, lack of cross ventilation and temperature gradient, those two are major factors, in my opinion, that contributed to the air conditioners being vector for the COVID infection. And I'm going to tell you another thing, that people have been hypnotized to believe that the droplets and the viruses don't go beyond a 12 feet diameter around the person, 6 feet in all directions. And the droplets, when they fall to the ground, they commit suicide. Then don't worry about them anymore. Once they hit the ground, we're okay. Both of them are wrong. And that is another thing that was overlooked. These droplets in a room with relative humidity of 50% or 60%, there is a study that any droplet below the size of 40 microns, by the time they fall from our mouth and nose level to the ground, it will be completely dried out. So there won't be any droplet hitting the floor. It will be on the way, it will be all dried out. And what they do when they dry out, they release the viruses into the air, and they get suspended into the air. These virus particles are 1/4 the size of the smoke particles. So once they are suspended, there is no reason for them to settle down to the ground anymore. Suppose some of the droplets finally make it to the ground, and on the ground, they're going to dry up. And then when the people start walking on the ground, they're going to be released. The virus particles are going to be released and resuspended into the air. So this slide shows how the droplets are drying out as they fall down from the mouth level. And the next slide shows how they're resuspended when the people walk on the ground where the virus particles are lying in wait. This slide shows that this is a human hair, and the smoke particle is about 4 times the size of a coronavirus particle. So if the smoke doesn't settle down in the room, you cannot expect the coronavirus to settle down. Once they are suspended or resuspended, they stay in the air. And that I call the virus smoke. The room is filled with these people, these viruses. If there are infected people or healthy carriers, asymptomatic carriers in the room is filled with these viruses. That is the virus smoke. And these virus particles also get taken through the air conditioned circulation into the whole building. So if patient or the carrier is in one room in the hospital or in the hotel room, they can be carried to the rest of the building through the air conditioning. And that's why I say the building gets infected, not the people. Sneaky hustler virus. I'm not going to go into all the details of how the viruses become very effective in spreading and infecting. That will have to be, you to read it up from my book, or the slow poison works on more people, because if it is a slow working poison, all the people would have taken the poison before the people start dying, and so you can kill more people with a slow poison than a rapidly acting poison, because then it will warn the people, hey, this is dangerous, don't go there. And so the COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, came with a 2% mortality compared to the 10% of its older brother, and the 37% the Middle Eastern virus. So it had a low percentage mortality, which gave a false impression of milder virus, and it allowed the virus to spread globally. And there are so many other factors involved in it spreading faster. Bacterial infection and viral infection and cancer. And I put that in one title because bacterial infection is extracellular. It's not, there are some few exceptions, but mostly they are extracellular. They divide on their own by binary fission. They don't need the host cells or host mechanism to help them to divide. They divide by themselves. The viruses, on the other hand, they cannot divide on their own. They get into the human cell, they hijack the human cell, convert the human cell to a virus factory. And that's why the viruses are created. And so to kill the bacteria, you can use antibiotics. To kill the virus, you have to kill our own infected cells. And what is similar to that? Cancer. So I am saying this in a spectrum from bacterial infection to the cancer, virus comes somewhere in the middle. It is not similar to a bacterial infection in its details. How we approach it should be different than approaching a bacterial infection. Another feature about the viral infection is that many of these viruses, once they get into your body, they don't leave your body. Bacterial infections are like a tsunami or a hurricane. They come and go. Whereas viral invasions are like a military invasion. They come, occupy, make a satellite inside, and they don't leave. These are some of the viruses that once you get them in the body, you cannot get rid of them. They are always there. And there are many more examples. I just gave you a few examples, that's all. So you cannot compare a bacterial infection to a viral invasion, like I want to put it like that. Prevention is better than treatment, okay? That's a general principle. Always prevention is better than treatment. Especially in the case of virus, there is no effective treatment possible. There are no good antiviral agents, and many other things we try, they have questionable value. So prevention is better, and prevention can be using mass social distancing, lockdown. They are of partial success. Preventing by destroying the virus with chemicals and heat, that has limited application. You cannot put disinfectant throughout the room, or you cannot kill all the viruses with that method. And prevention by destroying the virus by ultraviolet, very good method. I will go into the details later. But there are some problems with the ultraviolet. One, it causes harm to the human body. So it is dangerous, ultraviolet. Second, it is ineffective in certain ways because it's a light ray. It travels in straight line, and if there is an object in between the area to be disinfected and the source, there is a shadow and the virus is protected. Now, I don't want to go into the details of all the preventive measures, but I want to stress one of them. This is the most common size of the droplet is from 0.62 to 15.9 micron. Average mode is 8.35 micron. So let us take the 10 micron size. The 10 micron size takes about 8.2 minutes to settle from a height of 5 feet. 5 feet is the height of your mouth and nose. This is a slide published by CDC. Okay, CDC, Paul Barron, Division of Applied Technology. So it takes 8.2 minutes to settle 5 feet. And we are telling people that if you keep 6 feet distancing, you are protected. And I want to show you this. This person has a halo of virus that he is living, that it takes 8 minutes to settle. And how many people can walk through that? 10? So this 6 feet distancing was unscientific. And that was one of the best ways of preventive measures that WHO was advocating. And that's why in the beginning, a lot of resources were wasted on useless preventive measures. Ultraviolet, that's really good. There are 3 types of ultraviolet, A, B, and C. There are others also, but A, B, and for our discussion, only 3, A, B, and C. A and B come from sun all the way to the earth, and C is completely absorbed by the ozone layer. Because these viruses have been dealing with the A and B for billions of years, they have got adapted to it, and so A and B can barely kill these viruses. C, on the other hand, is new for the virus, and it can kill. This is why ultraviolet C is also called germicidal, because it can kill the germs. Ultraviolet is harmful for the body, and I have listed a bunch of problems that it can cause. And ultraviolet is ineffective because it goes only through straight line, and so you can have shadows. So there are many places where there are ultraviolet lamps on the ceiling and to disinfect the room. But if there are any structure, the virus can hide under that or behind those, and the ultraviolet will not protect. Also, in surgical disinfection methods, the ultraviolet can only disinfect the top of the top layer of instruments. So it is called a surface disinfectant. And there are other less use method of disinfecting using airflow and all that, but it is very limited. But what I'm going to explain is where you can disinfect the entire air in such a way that you will not be breathing an untreated air. That's what I'm going to try to. Okay, the UVC destroys the genome and makes the virus incapable of replication. Most of the proteins are preserved. I call it a neutered virus because in all respects other than its ability to replicate, the virus is looking good and behaving normal, but it cannot replicate. So that's the neutered virus. Neutered virus with preserved proteins can be a good material for vaccines. So what did I do over the last 4 years? I did 2 things. 1, to clean the air, and 2, to kill the virus. By combining these 2, I am saying you can prevent the next pandemic. This is a poor guy who is infected with the virus, and vaccines, antivirals, miscellaneous antibiotics, antibodies. They all have only a limited action on the viral infection. Not only that, remember, the virus is a permanent resident in the body. Even if you think that you are cured, you are not cured. The virus is still lingering in the body. In a lot of cases. So what is that we should do? We should do is to protect the individual in such a way that the virus cannot touch you, cannot come into your body. And that is what I have been working on for the last 4 years. You're going to create a protection inside which the individual is safe. Again, there are two aspects involved. One is to clean the air, two is to kill the bug. This is cleaning the air. You can see that by bringing the air from at the ground level, you can let the airflow take all the viruses in the room. You'll be wondering why this was not applied earlier. Why did not think about it? This will be a self-cleaning system where the room air will be continuously real-time cleaned. I did that to my office. See, these vents, I put down tracks through the wall, closed the top ceiling vents, and brought the air at the ground level. So now the air is coming out from here and is going up through the ceiling, and in the process, it's going to clean out the room. And that is a self-cleaning system that I am advocating. So this is what, graphically, this is what is going to happen. The air is coming from the ground level and it's going up, and in the process, it's going to take the virus and other particles out. There are two problems are covered here. One, the temperature gradient is corrected because the air is coming from the bottom and going up, and the cross ventilation. This is almost like a cross ventilation. So both problems of air conditioners are resolved by this. Now still remains the problem of what happens to the viruses that are taken out through that. You can do two things. One, you can let it go to the outside over the roof, or you can recirculate it after running through an ultraviolet unit that is in the attic, so that nobody is exposed to that, the ultraviolet. So the same air conditioning unit that acted as a vector, now you can use the same air conditioning unit to protect you, the same unit, because it's impossible to kill all the viruses all around in the air, but you can kill the viruses inside the air conditioning unit. So that, but through the self-cleaning and using the ultraviolet in the attic, you get a clean air that is disinfected. For individuals, I propose the portable personal bioprotection device. It's an ultraviolet unit here, which is protected inside a ultraviolet safe box, so the ultraviolet doesn't come out. And it's taken through a tubing to a mask which is airtight. There is no pores through the mask. The mask is airtight. And so this person breathes only air that is disinfected through this unit. He can be standing next to a patient. He's not going to get the virus because the air has to go through the unit, and where the ultraviolet will destroy the virus. We designed one in our office through a 3D printer, and we tested it, and it was 100% successful. So we fed the Wuhan virus through the inlet, and the air coming out was totally devoid of active virus, totally. And we can make a bigger unit for the attic. And again, the same principle, the box is UV protected, and inside the ultraviolet, it kills the virus. What is happening inside is a serpiginous pathway of the um, viruses going through a short length in the box, but a long course through the box. So for a 12-inch box, you can have 150-inch of air travel, and that the mechanism inside is arranged such that the virus will be very close to the ultraviolet lamps. And so this close contact for a desired amount of time will destroy the virus. And again, this is why we got 100% success. Stopping the pandemic. So this is what we have to do. We have to convert buildings to modify the air condition like in my office. Second, regulate new buildings for self-cleaning airflow. We have to make a regulation that if the air is coming through the ground floor, it can go through the attic or through the ceiling. Or if you want the air to come through the ceiling, it has to go out at the ground level. You cannot have both of them at the same level. That has to be regulated. And protect air conditioners with UVC disinfection. Personal device for caregivers and family members. The protection, something similar to the personal device for ventilators. The ventilators in the beginning of COVID pandemic was causing almost 90% mortality. Once you go into the ventilator, there's a 90% chance that they won't come out of it. And some of the reason maybe, this is my hypothesis, that that the virus that the person is trying to breathe out is taken out and pumped back into him through the ventilator. So by putting a unit of this in the circuit of the ventilator, you can destroy the virus, and so the virus won't go back to the same virus won't go back to the person. And the same can be done for anesthesia equipment. Otherwise, those hospital equipments can get contaminated. And that is one of the reasons there is hospital-acquired infection, contamination, and combining the self-cleaning airflow, air conditioning the attic, and the air conditioning units on the ventilators and the anesthesia machines and other equipment, you can drastically reduce hospital-acquired infection. You won't go into 10% of people, around 10% of people go into the hospital with some problem, come out with a different problem. That an infection-wise. So this should be stopped. This is an example of what the visitors, caregivers, everybody is wearing the personal protection. You can see that the patient is not wearing a mask. There is a good reason for that, because if you make the patient wear the mask, it is good source prevention. You're blocking the patient giving the virus to us. But what happened to the patient himself? He's going on rebreathing the same virus again and again, because the virus trapped in the mask goes back into him. And so this is why it is advisable not to force a mask on the patient. There are other ways we can tackle. This is a device in the ventilator circuit. This is an anesthesia machine. Benefits: it prevent pandemic, it can produce hospital infections, seasonal flu, and it also can reduce allergies, because you are breathing clean air, and so you are reducing the pollens and other things. Now, I want to take a few minutes, just 2 minutes, about the vaccine. The vaccines are not the primary defender of the person. It's a backup plan. It's not our first line of prevention for the virus infection. And for the reasons I already told you. Again, if you are making a vaccine, there are some things that we should take into consideration. One, a single antigen uh, vaccine is easy for the virus to mutate and evade. And when there are four antigens, like a whole pathogen vaccine, they are much more difficult to evade. And this is like a number lock. See that there is a number that has to match, and the virus is mutating and matching it number one, and it's already evaded the vaccine. Whereas if you have four numbers to match, the virus is going on mutating. Even if it has 1, 2, or 3 matched numbers, it cannot still evade because the fourth one will kill the virus. And it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have a memory, so even the numbers that match, they will continue to mutate. And so for such a four antigen vaccine to work, all the four numbers to be matched at the same time, then only the virus can evade the vaccine. If one or two or three match, it will not stop. It will not store the good information, but it will keep on mutating, and until it gets all four, which is almost impossible to happen. And this is why I am concerned that the flu vaccines today, as a whole virus vaccine, attenuated or killed virus. And now we are looking, the government is pouring money into developing an mRNA vaccine for flu. I don't know if it is progression or regression, because we are going for multi-antigen vaccine to a single antigen vaccine, which we can evade much faster. So something to be considered about developing a new mRNA vaccine for the virus. The best method is to use attenuated live vaccine. And you can do it through chemicals where the virus will be totally disfigured and the proteins can be denatured, or it can be through using UVC when you get a neutered virus. The whole structure is maintained except that it cannot multiply. So all the antigens are intact, and this is why I recommend that kind of vaccine. And you can even have vaccine chambers. You feed the active virus through the top, and then make it neuter it and release it into the room, and people can be sitting there and playing cards or chess for a few minutes, and they get automatically immunized without contact, with no injections, nothing by mouth, just breathe the air of containing the neutered virus. And this is particularly useful in the case of veterinary medicine, because you cannot, it's not very easy to develop a vaccine for the animals and inject each one of them. But instead of killing millions of chicken, you can put them through this device where the virus is bird flu virus is fed here, and it is neutered, and it is released into a chamber, and the chicken are made to stay there for some time, and they get immunized. And so our egg prices can go down after that. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.